An Egyptian strikes a Hebrew, and Moshe witnesses it. He surveys every direction, making certain there are no eyes upon him. What he is about to do will be done without witnesses. And when Moshe sees that there is no one there, he strikes the Egyptian dead. Then, to ensure that the act remains concealed, he hides the body in the sand. Morning comes. Moshe himself, a Hebrew of Hebrews, holds his first loyalty and affection for the Hebrew people. Imagine then when he spies two Hebrews contending with one another, one raising his hand against his brother. The very violence he had confronted in the Egyptian, it has now appeared among his own people. Moshe steps toward the aggressor. Why do you strike your brother? And he calls the man Rasha. It's an indictment of his personal character. The word means the wicked one. But the man does not retreat beneath Moshe's judgment. He turns it back upon him. Do you intend to kill me as you killed the Egyptian? The accusation turns back upon Moshe. He has called another man wicked for striking his brother, but only one day earlier, Moshe had struck the Egyptian. So the sequence is the Egyptian strikes, Moshe strikes, the Hebrew strikes, and Moshe enters into judgment. He desired justice, and justice is good. But the garden has already shown us what happens when the good is pursued beneath the authority of human wisdom alone. You see, the woman sees that the fruit is good for food. She sees that it is desirable to make one wise. And then she stretches her hand forth and takes. The sequence is seeing, desiring, taking. The human becomes the one who determines what is good and what is evil. A Torah generated from within the self. And once judgment comes beneath the authority of that personal Torah, even the desire for what is good becomes distorted. Justice becomes vengeance. Discernment becomes accusation. The hand reaches out to establish through force what the eye has judged to be right. This is the fall in Eden, and its consequence is exile, distance from the presence of the divine. Moshe sees injustice, and he desires justice. But beneath the authority of his own wisdom, he takes judgment into his own hand, and Moshe enters exile. Moshe enters Midian as a fugitive from justice. He seats himself beside a well, and there he encounters injustice yet again, the same variety he witnessed in Egypt, meaning the powerful oppressing the weak. There are 7 daughters of the priest of Midian, and they have come to draw water for their father's flock. But the shepherds of the land drive them away, keeping access to the resource of water for themselves. Moshe sees the strength of the shepherds being used against the vulnerable, and once again, he places himself between the powerful and the weak. He steps into the confrontation, but this time, the sequence has changed. Vayokom, Vayoshian, Vayashk et Zonam. He arose, he delivered them, and he watered their flock. The men who claimed the place used their strength to control access to life. But Moshe, a stranger in a strange land with no standing among them, becomes a redeemer by restoring what had been withheld. So simply driving the men away would have ended the immediate threat. But Moshe does more. He completes the neglected work. He gives water to the flock, completing the work the shepherds refused to perform. In Egypt, Moshe hides the oppressor he murdered beneath the sand, burying the evidence of his deed. Yet still, the people remained enslaved. At the well, he confronts force and restores access to life. So retaliation answers the aggressor. Deliverance restores what the aggressor denied. Moshe still desires justice, but justice is no longer being seized beneath the authority of his own judgment. His strength and power are beginning to take the form of service. The rulers and nobility of Israel are meant to shepherd the nation. Yet Ezekiel turns this image against those in power and names them false shepherds. They feed themselves from the flock, taking what belongs to the people while failing to strengthen the weak, heal the sick, bind the injured, or seek the lost, ruling instead with force and harshness. This is a direct inversion of the Eden vocation. The human was placed in the land to be a blessing, a generative presence through whom flourishing life extends outward. But these rulers, they do not generate life. They are consumers of it. And God responds. He responds to the failure of the false shepherds. He declares that he himself will search for the flock, and he will gather those who have been scattered. He will bind the injured, and he will strengthen the weak. He will feed them in good pasture. The rulers had consumed the life of the people, but God will restore it. The shepherds had scattered the flock. God will gather it back together. The men entrusted with care had become a curse. God will again generate blessing in the land. But God does not abandon the human vocation. He works through the human who is properly aligned with him. Through Adam, God gathers. Through Adam, God nourishes. And through Adam, God restores. And so the promise narrows. God will raise one shepherd over the flock, one who will feed the people rather than feed upon them, one through whom God himself will shepherd the people. But formation is not a straight line. So years later, Israel again stands without water. The people gather against Moshe and Aaron. They are contending with them. They accuse them. And once again, Moshe stands between a suffering people and the source of life. God tells him to take the staff, gather the assembly, and speak to the rock before their very eyes. The rock will give us water. But rather than speak to the rock as commanded, Moshe instead turns his words upon the people. Hear now, you rebels. Once again, Moshe enters into judgment. He names the character of the people standing before him. But once again, the indictment rebounds right back upon himself. For even as he names them rebels, Moshe himself stands in rebellion against the very word he was commanded to carry. Then he raises his hand. Vayach, the same Hebrew word used when Moshe struck the Egyptian, is now used when he strikes the rock. The hand that struck the Egyptian now strikes the source from which water is meant to flow, not once, but twice. And the water comes, and the people drink. The visible need is met, but the gift has been passed through a human no longer properly aligned with the giver. Moshe has provided the water and misrepresented the God from whom the water came. The deliverer who judged and struck in Egypt cannot complete the journey when in the wilderness he again enters into judgment and strikes the rock in anger. The fracture within him was never fully resolved. And generations later, Yeshua stands before the people of Israel again. And Yeshua says, I am the good shepherd. This is not an isolated pastoral image unique only to the Gospels. It is the answer to Ezekiel's promise and an indictment against the rulers standing before him. The false shepherds had fed themselves from the flock. They had ruled with force. They had scattered those entrusted to their care. And God had declared that he himself would shepherd the people through one human properly aligned with him. And now that human stands before the flock. The hired hand preserves himself, and when danger comes, he abandons the sheep and runs. The thief comes to take, to consume, and to destroy. But the good shepherd gives life. He does not use the flock to preserve himself. Instead, he gives himself to preserve the flock. The false shepherd feeds upon the life of the people. The good shepherd lays down his very life for them. This is Adam properly reflecting the image of God. His sight remains fixed upon the Father. His desire remains ordered toward the life of the flock, and his action gives rather than takes. Seeing, desiring, and giving. The sequence of Eden has been reordered. The human does not seize what is desirable beneath the authority of his own wisdom. Rather, he gives himself beneath the authority of the Father. Moshe strikes in Egypt. At the rock, he strikes again. But the good shepherd carries the pattern beyond Moshe. He does not strike in order to establish his own judgment, but instead is struck, bearing judgment in his own body, so that the flock may receive life. Moshe remains both the human who gives water and the human who strikes the source from which the water flows. He is not reduced simply to the murder in Egypt, but nor is he elevated into the unbroken archetypal ideal. He is a human orientated toward justice, yet still being formed in the manner by which justice is carried into the world. And this is the measure held before Adam throughout the biblical narrative. Not the isolated act, but the direction in which sight, desire, and action are being ordered. The false shepherd sees the flock and he takes. The good shepherd sees the flock and gives. That is how the shepherd is revealed.